Good morning, everyone. Bruno Rodriguez here, incident meteorologist, and joined by our interpreter, Tara, once again. So another day on the fire and a few changes when it comes to the weather. First, touch a little bit on what we saw yesterday. So yesterday we saw a continuation of those kind of northwest winds out there. They were weaker than the day before. Mostly saw gusts 20 miles an hour and under yesterday. But those winds were fairly favorable, again, pushing the fire really up against itself along this western perimeter. Overnight last night, we saw recoveries really start to come down. So, we've seen probably 3 or 4 nights with humidity recoveries up above 80, even 90%. And that started to change as high pressure begins to build over the region. And that high pressure is going to continue to strengthen over the next day or two. And I'll touch on that a little more in a bit. Over on the right here, I have a weather graphic showing the overnight recoveries that were observed over the fire. So for the most part, south zone, including Pecos Valley, you're looking at humidity recoveries in the 40 to 55% range for humidity. But you'll notice there was a lot of variability. Northern zones even getting up into the 60s and 70s for humidity. A lot of that to do with the higher elevations up closer to the Mora and Chacon areas up there on the west and east zones of the fire. Since I'm on this webpage, I think a lot of you are probably interested in where you can access this kind of information, how you can view weather observations for yourselves. And I really like this website. There are a lot of different places you can go to grab observations from, but as far as weather service pages go in particular, this one I would say is one of the most public-friendly pages out there. So if you're curious, you can go to Google, and if you just type NWS Data Viewer, that's NWS Data Viewer, first link that should pop up will take you to a national map. It'll be zoomed out, but it's an interactive map, and you can do a lot of different things on it, lots of neat features. So right now I have it zoomed in over the Hermits Peak / Calf Canyon fire, which is this purple perimeter that you see here. But there will be a menu on the right, this overlays menu, and this is where you can do a lot of different stuff with the functionality of the web page. So right now I have it set to maximum relative humidity, but you can display just temperatures, you can display wind gusts, you can display maximum temperatures so far, minimum temperatures, maximum gusts, even things like the 24-hour change in humidity or temperature, which can be a really neat thing to view. Also here, you'll notice other things like density. You can change the density of weather stations. If you just click one here, you'll notice it becomes much less busy. So for ease of viewing, it can be nice. You can really only increase to all stations once you're a little bit zoomed in, so that's just something to note. Also under layers, there are a few features here that you can add on and off. I have wildfire perimeters from this current year toggled on, which is how I'm seeing this. You can toggle on also NWS warnings, watches and warnings. You can toggle on radar if you want. So there's a bunch of different things you can do. And then you can also change the base map to satellite imagery or street view type stuff as well under this section here. So that's just a quick overview of this webpage. Again, that's NWS Data Viewer. If you type that into Google, first link that pops up. All right, so that's pretty much what we saw last night. In terms of humidity recoveries, they were probably about 20 to 35 points lower than they were the previous night. So they're actually low enough to the point where vegetation was susceptible to fire, and they were actually able to get some successful firing operations done down here in divisions Charlie and Echo, thanks to that lowering humidity, which was kind of moderate, and obviously not low enough for aggressive fire behavior either. They also had very light terrain-driven winds, like we were discussing yesterday. Speeds really just kind of 2, 5, 6 miles an hour, downslope, down valley winds, which again was really favorable for those firing operations. Looking at today, so a couple changes. First, the drier conditions, but probably more noticeable is going to be the wind direction. So after a couple of days of that northwest wind, we're finally switching over to that more typical wind pattern, which is out of the southwest or west. So already seeing quite a bit of south winds picking up today. They're not too strong today, maybe just 1 or 2 miles an hour stronger than they were yesterday. Again, a little bit of terrain influence, so some of those kind of north or northwest facing slopes getting a bit of a westerly push instead of southwest. And then eastern areas, including Las Vegas, I-25 corridor, and Division Alpha Bravo here up north towards Mora and north of that. Looking at more of a southerly flow as those southwest winds kind of rotate around the base of the Sagrada de Cristo Mountains. In terms of temperatures, again, high pressure building in, so a lot warmer today, expecting to hit the high 70s, maybe even 80 degrees in a couple locations, including Las Vegas, probably as well the lower elevations of the Pecos Valley. Humidity during the day, just a little bit lower than it was yesterday, but those drier conditions persisting for a little longer as well in the afternoon. So we're looking at humidity dropping down into the single digits, upper single digits for most of the fire, probably low teens for some of these higher elevations and the northern zones closer to Taos and Chacon. Let's see, what else do I have here? I have to check my notes. There's a lot of information you guys want. So high pressure building in. You can see the satellite imagery here. If I point over here, you can see a low pressure system rotating really over eastern Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas. So that's moving on slowly eastward. You can see clear skies indicating high pressure building over the western United States. And then off the west coast, an increase in clouds here. And that's really that eastern kind of periphery of the deeper low pressure system that's going to be coming in over the next few days. So that's going to inch eastward a little bit slowly, and then it's going to kind of stall over the west coast and Great Basin, especially over Nevada. And so that's going to continue to channel strong winds between the low pressure and the high pressure, and those we'll see those south or southwest and west winds persisting for several days, and that's what's going to lead to that critical fire weather pattern. So as we head into tonight, looking at a continuation of those worsening recoveries, probably down to around 30% for some of the southern zones and maybe closer to 40% for some of the northern zones. Temperatures coming up as well, clear skies for a few days, and then as we head into tomorrow, we're going to start to notice an increase in those wind speeds. Don't pay too much attention to the numbers themselves. Really, this graphic here is mostly for planning purposes, trying to represent, general average conditions for the majority of the fire. Again, I was listening to the operations section chief this morning, and he threw out a fact during the morning briefing that there's over 350 miles of perimeter just in the south zone alone below this dotted line here. So even more than that as you consider those northern zones. So it's vast, vast country, lots of different conditions out there. But in general, we'll be looking at an increase in winds, probably some gusts reaching into the 30s tomorrow. Again, continued out of the west-southwest. You'll notice that worsening overnight recovery and much warmer temperatures. So Friday, Saturday, we should be under that dome of high pressure, meaning that's when temperatures should peak. I would expect probably mid to high 80s for most of the lower elevations, including the Pecos Valley and Las Vegas. And then most of the fire footprint itself, probably in the upper 70s to low 80s for temperatures. Certainly once we get to tomorrow and beyond, expecting minimum humidity during the afternoon hours in the single digits, and that's pretty much going to persist for the foreseeable future into early next week as well. Again, lengthening duration in the afternoon for critically low humidity, and especially once we get to Friday night and beyond, those humidity recoveries dropping down below 30%, getting into the low to mid 20s for recovery, which is definitely heading into critical territory. Speaking of critical conditions, come Saturday, we now have a fire weather watch that was issued by the local forecast office out of Albuquerque. That's in effect 11 a.m. through 9 p.m., primarily due to those strong gusty winds and low humidity. One thing I will note, you'll probably notice some yellows and greens up here for increased cloud cover. We are going to see a bit of an influx in moisture as that low pressure approaches from the west. It's not going to be surface moisture, so it's still going to be very, very dry, again in the single digits at the surface, but aloft we're going to notice an increase in clouds and humidity. That could allow for formation of what we call pyrocumulus clouds, which we've seen a few days already on this incident in the past. But that's also contingent on what the fire is actually doing on the ground. If you don't have enough fire activity on the ground itself and enough heat generated to get those updrafts and those smoke columns developing, you're not going to be able to tap into that moisture aloft and that elevated instability. But just note that that potential is there, so don't be too surprised if you start to see some of those puffy white cumulus clouds above any kind of vertically developing smoke plumes, especially Friday afternoon and Saturday, possibly as well into Sunday. In terms of the winds, really notching up a little bit every day. So tomorrow, not too gusty yet, but really getting into the mid to upper 30s for our gusts on Saturday when we have that fire weather watch in effect. And then continuing to increase Sunday and especially Monday, which remains at this time looking like the windiest day of all of them. And then notching down a little bit come Tuesday, but still likely fairly gusty out there. Temperatures will come down a little bit Sunday and Monday as that high pressure weakens and inches eastward. But in terms of impacts on fire behavior, really we're going to be keying in on the wind speeds and the humidity with that. Overnight, one thing to consider, wind patterns overnight have been mostly dominated the past few days by those kind of light downslope, down valley winds. That may continue into Friday, Saturday, maybe even Sunday. But once those winds really start to pick up, it's going to be harder for those winds to die down enough overnight. So we're probably going to see a lot of that west and southwest wind persisting even during the overnight periods, which really is a positive thing considering where the fire line is and where we're concerned with a lot of the communities in the Pecos Valley. In terms of overnight inversions as well, I think Bladen touched on that in a few of their briefings. Again, with high pressure building overhead, that tends to increase the likelihood of inversions in the valleys and the likelihood of downslope, down valley winds. So as that high pressure weakens, as you head into the weekend and especially early next week, becoming less likely that you'll see those terrain-driven winds overnight. Winds, for the most part, will be peaking during the afternoon hours, so really 11 a.m. to about 6 p.m. for the strongest winds each day. So that's really all I have. Just to recap, looking at a bit of a transition day or two over the next 24 to 48 hours. Really, the next couple of days is going to see very significant changes in weather conditions, very rapid changes, and then flattening out with critical fire weather conditions at least Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. With that, have a great day.